Please welcome this evening's moderator, Apple's Senior Vice President of Internet Software and Services, Eddie Q.
How you doing? It's great to be here. It's an incredible honor today, and I'll talk a little bit more once our real guest gets here. I'll be a lot louder. How's that? Yeah. All right. So I said this is a real honor for me. There you go. I am. No. So this is a real honor for me. I've been a huge, huge fan of Bruce for over 40 years. There's no songs I've listened to more than Bruce songs. When I want to get inspired, those are the songs I listen to. When I'm sad, they're the songs that make me happy. Sometimes when I listen to some songs, I can cry. He means the world to me. I think he is simply the best, and I love Bruce Springsteen, and that's why I'm here today. And with that, Bruce Springsteen.
Okay.
All right. So this is great. You know, one of the great things about Bruce is even when you look at the book, and I read the book, and from the first sentence, you could tell that he wrote it.
That's always good.
And you know, when you look at the book, you've been such a private person on your personal life, and you shared so much in the book. What made you want to do that at this time?
You know, you have to open up your life a little bit if you're gonna write the book. So, but I took my parameters. I said, well, I want to write about basically where the music comes from, what are the influences on my music, and that seemed to be a part of it. So when I got to those sections, which were really kind of the toughest sections to write, because you're often writing about your present, all the people that are in your life now, and you're writing about your personal life. It's not my favorite thing, but I had a good sense of boundaries as to sort of what I wanted to do, you know, and basically I wanted to let people know, like I said, what were the influences on my music, where it came from, and that was part of it. So
it's amazing. You look at the way he wrote it. It feels like poetry. It's the same way as the songs. But there were four things that I wanted to bring up that really resonated with me, and I think in this time in this country are very, very important. And one is the American dream. When I read your book, I think about where you started, your humble beginnings, and what you've been able to do. What are the things and attributes that have made you live what is the American dream?
Desperation, a little mental insanity. All those things are the fuel for the fire, really, at the end of the day, you know. And so you're in pursuit of... my project was always kind of an identity project, you know. I wrote songs to figure out who I was, to figure out how to put some of the pieces that I felt my life was in back together, to figure out where I belonged. And to do that, you had to get into the idea of who you were as an American, what that meant, what living here means. And, you know, initially your motivation is you just want to be competent at something, you know. And I was telling the folks at the show that there was only one other thing I could do for 4 hours. And unfortunately, it was by myself. So, you know, you're just trying to get good at something and bring something to the ball game.
I'm not much younger than you, but a little bit younger than me than you. And I can tell you, just as a person who's a first-generation American from my parents, it makes a difference to see people, what they can accomplish when you do what you've done. And it impacted me. And I think that's why it's important for everyone to know and read this. The second thing that I saw was the women in your life. Your grandmother, your mother, your aunt, and Patty. Can you talk a little bit about how they impacted? And
just had you know, our family was matriarchal. You know, the men were kind of Irish and a little on the sullen side, but the women were dynamic and explosive. You know, the way they worked, what they brought to their jobs, they were all three of them. It was my mother and her 2 sisters. All 3 of them were the same. You know, they were just these dynamos, you know, of activity and action, and with a certain sort of hopeless optimism that they carried with them their entire lives, you know. So they were very powerful. They were very, as far as the active part of my life, they were very, very powerful. And my grandmother was very influential because she really raised me the first 6 years of my life. My father and I were basically raised by kind of the same woman. You know, my mother, there was some tension in the house, so my mother allowed her to call the shots. And I go into it in the book a little bit. She had a daughter who was killed in the gas station around the corner, and so I came along, and I was kind of the replacement child, and I got all the benefits and the curses of that particular role, you know.
It's, again, another moment that I looked at, as I said, from a personal point of view of how women have impacted his life and impacted mine, so it meant a lot. The third thing, which I think is a very serious issue that I'm glad came out in the book and I think can help a lot, is mental illness. And I think it's an area that we can do so much more. And, you know, talk a little bit about how that impacted you. And
you know, I came from it was a group of people where there was a lot of illness that ran in the Irish side of the family particularly, but the Italian side also. And it would just pick people off here and there, you know, my cousin, my aunt, my grandmother at one time, then my father. So, but you just lived with it in those days. You didn't even recognize it for what it was. You just thought it was somewhat unusual behavior, and you accepted it because those were the people you loved. They were the people you cared for, and who they were was who they were. So as a child, you didn't really, it didn't register, and then there was no way that people understood about getting help or the psychopharmacology. They didn't understand it that day, at that time. So it was just left to marinate. You know, we all sort of marinated in it. And I mean, years later, I got a lot of help. But when I was a kid, it was just deep mystery. It was just mysterious. You know, I'd never met anybody who'd spent any time in a doctor's office or an analysis or anything like that. So you were kind of left to fend for yourself. That, for me, is where my music came from. I think my music was the first thing that really kind of centered me, and it was very medicinal. It just was cathartic, and it really just brought you into it rooted you. It rooted you, which is what I was looking for.
The fourth thing is work ethic. And I had the privilege of working with Steve Jobs for 20 years, and it reminded me a little bit of Steve when I was reading the book at the amount of time and detail that you spend on the things that you do. When you look at this book, it was a 7-year project. When you think of Born to Run, the song, it took you 6 months. Can you talk a little bit about like the Born to Run album and give us some stories of what it was like creating and the work that was required to do that?
Yeah, that was pretty torturous. It wasn't much fun. It was just, we didn't know how to make records. We didn't know how to get sounds. It was very difficult. It took us a long time to just get to a studio where the equipment was working, and then we fell in with Mr. Jimmy Iovine, who's around here somewhere tonight. There he is. And he helped us solve a lot of our problems, may I say, by getting the record to sound great and to sound the way I heard it in my head. Jimmy was really good at that. And then of course John got us over to Jimmy and over to the record plant, John Landau, and so it was. But the record itself was a lot of. I worried over everything in those days. I took a microscope to every part of our recording process and every note that I was singing, and I was young and very, very insecure, so I had to work on it. I had to work on everything 3 times before I let it go. I had to beat myself up over the whole project before I felt like, okay, there's nothing else I can do. But it was a hard record to make. It was a hard record, but in the end, I listen to it now, and you forget all about the pain, and just go, oh, that sounds good. It sounds the way I wanted it to sound. So,
well, Jimmy gave me a great story that I really appreciated, again, for the work ethic and attention to detail. Was one time he mentioned that you wanted a certain rhythm, and you kept playing these drums and doing it over and over and over again for hours and hours. I think Jimmy says it was over 20 hours. He says he fell asleep at one point, and when he woke up, you were still doing the same thing.
That was not uncommon, unfortunately. It was a Sisyphean task, our record making project. But yeah, we were relentless, but we were often just chasing our tails and beating the hell out of ourselves and taking a lot of time. But Jimmy did well. He stayed awake most of the time.
It's great to see that attention to detail. That's how you make great things, and I was really interested in seeing that process and learning about it, which is great. Now, I have a love for cars that people know about, and one of the great things that I see with you is you put cars in the covers of your albums. You've sang about cars. One of my favorite songs is Racing in the Street. The book has a beautiful Corvette on the cover. And then I read the book, and I realized that you didn't drive much when you were young and didn't get a license. And so what was that all about?
I didn't drive much at all. Well, it's the whole story. Chuck Berry wasn't in high school when he wrote all those great songs. Brian Wilson didn't surf, and I didn't drive very much. So it really, I tell a story in the book at how when I was young, there was these, in the summer, thunderstorms would occur. My grandparents were very old school and very superstitious, so my grandmother would run us up the street to my aunt's house. We had 6 houses on one block, and she would run me into the house. They'd pull the blinds down. They'd get the holy water out. They'd start sprinkling the holy water over all of us. And there was this incredible terror at thunder and lightning, And somebody mentioned to me that the safest place during a lightning storm was in a car. So by now I was terrified of lightning because of my grandparents. And so any time that it rained or thundered, I would scream to get in the car and have my parents drive me around till the storm ended in case we got struck. And I ended up writing about cars for the rest of my life. So I'm sure it had something to do with that, you know.
Now, your bandmates said you weren't a very good driver when you started. Is that was that inaccurate?
Yeah, I was a terrible driver for a very long time. I didn't even have a license. I drove without a license for a while because they needed me to. But but no, I was just not good behind the wheel. That's all.
A great story that I loved in the book and really great to see was Patty, when talking about your kids, mentioned that if you wanted to have a better or stronger relationship with your kids, you had to wake up earlier.
Right.
So besides learning how to make pancakes, how did that?
Well, I lived like a musician my whole life. That was you're up till 3, 4. There were years when I would go to bed at 8 a.m. in the morning and get up at 6 or 7 at night. So I lived like this for a long time. So when we first had the kids, it was sort of like it worked out okay because when they woke up at night, I'd be up and I'd take care of them at nighttime, and then she would take care of them once the sun came up. But once they started to sleep through the night, it became a little unfair. So she said, "Gee, you got to wait. If you don't wake up, you're going to miss them in the morning. You're not going to be there." And so I forced myself up one day, and I went downstairs, and I learned how to make the pancakes and eggs and everything else. And there was something that happened in the morning that didn't happen the rest of the day. You know, they needed you in a way that was unique, and also became this ritual that so much of family life is. You know, but they're these small little rituals that guide the kids and root them at home. And I found out that if I was good for 45 minutes in the morning or an hour and a half, it really covered a lot of the rest of the day. You know, they really. They just really felt your presence at that time. So
that's great. You've played all over the world, tens of thousands of people, and yet you talk about the Super Bowl as this big thing. What was that like? What made that so different? And you started the book at that time, even.
Right. Well, the Super Bowl was funny because, you're going to play in front of 150 million people. That's probably more people than you've played for in most of the rest of your career. And the nice thing is it's a free gig. They don't pay you. But nobody else gets charged. So you're doing this big free show for 12 minutes in the middle of the afternoon for everyone in the United States and the world. So that's the upside of it. The downside of it is, if you fuck up, it's going to be really bad. Really, really bad. You don't want to fuck up at the Super Bowl if you can. So there's this slight underlying terror because you also have the least control of any other. I mean, you come out on the field, you stand there, field is empty. There's nothing there. There's no stage, there's no speakers. And then with about 8 minutes to go, you see your fans running out onto the field with pieces of your stage. Doesn't inspire that much confidence. And, there's a kid with his baseball hat on backwards and his shorts carrying the cable that's going to make the difference whether you get hurt at home or not. So, but amazingly, they get it all put together and it works. But Rocky, the higher you are on the tightrope, the more thrilling it is, but also the further you have to fall. So you're way up on the tightrope on that day. It was fun. We enjoyed it at the end of the day. And I wrote an essay that I put on the website that kind of started me writing the book. So it was a good time.
Well, one of the amazing things is if you love Bruce concerts as much as I do, you don't know what to expect. You go to the concert, and I've been lucky sometimes to even have the set lists that you've written beforehand, but you change it even as the concert's going. What is it that what are you feeling? What's the sense, or what's going on that causes you to sort of change what's happening?
People pay, you know, they don't really pay to hear their favorite songs. They pay for you to be as present and as alive as you can be on that particular evening, because that's what makes the audience come to life. So it's not about any particular piece of music or any particular song. It's just how truly present you can be. So I go out in search of that particular. I go out to lose myself in the music, because once you're lost in the music, you're completely there. You know, you're inhabiting everything you're singing, and the night just takes off. You know, so the reason we change the set list is the set list can, when it becomes confining. If it becomes confining, I throw it out. You know, so we'll get into. We may, sometimes I'll change it for the very first song. You know, if we get out there and I just feel something else in the air. But to have a band that has the ability to be that flexible is very important. So I can turn to them. Yeah, let's hear it for these people. So that's very important, to have a band that can follow you, and Max can read my lips, and the other guys can pick up, and we can change on a dime. So it's and it just makes the night more exciting also.
Speaking of the band, one of the most amazing things that I've never seen any other performer or any concert do is you go to the concert, you've got your set list, and in the middle of it you've got people with posters and yelling songs, and you go off and do a song that's not yours. How does the band and how do you do that?
Well, everybody has years and years of bar band experience, so we all have this common well of just musical history that we've all grown up with, and so it's a common language. There's not a whole lot we can get thrown by. There's also a little man under the stage with a teleprompter that can find the lyrics to anything we want to play in about 30 seconds.
It's good for you, but what about the band?
It is. And the band generally has a feel, knows the music, you know. So it's just a trick, you know. But it's once again, it's about the communication between the band members and myself, and how we've grown up, you know. It's kind of lovely to share all that with the guys.
As a fan, I can tell you that it's really special and means a lot. It's just amazing because it shows the love that you guys have for music.
Yeah, and the people get to call some of the shots during the night, so that's fun.
Absolutely. Now, in the book, you talk about books and authors that have impacted you and that you've read. And speaking particularly about Ron, the Vietnam vet born on the 4th of July, how did you meet him, and how is that? What has that done for you?
I was traveling through Arizona. I stopped at a little drugstore, and they had the paperback copy of Born on the 4th of July. And I went to a place called the Sunset Marquee, which is a famous sort of rock stars hangout motel in Los Angeles, where we stayed for many, many years. And there was a guy in a wheelchair by the pool. And it's kind of the small world theory, where we got talking after a day or so, and he said, "Hey, I'm Ron Kovic, and I wrote Born on the 4th of July." So we just started to get together, and he took me to the vet center, and I met a lot of Vietnam veterans from California, and one thing led to another, and I got involved with them on putting on some concerts and some things, you know. But Ron, that's an incredible book. It's just a beautiful book of coming home.
I loved it. That's why I brought it up. It's what
beautiful.
You guys did. One of the things, I've been to a lot of concerts and been to see you in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, but in talking to John Landau, he always used to tell me, Barbara, you have to go see Bruce in Europe and see what the fans are like around the world to kind of experience. And when you go, it's amazing to see 60, 70, 80,000 people, Italians in Spain and Sweden, singing every song, every word. This is in English, about America, How do you think that came about? What's resonated so well?
Well, in the early '80s, we had an agent who said you should go to Europe because there's an audience there if you go and win it. You know, they love rock and roll. So we'd been one other time in the mid-'70s for 4 shows. It was very scary. We were kids who'd never been out of New Jersey. We were 25 years old. We couldn't find a cheeseburger anyplace. Europe was a lot more European in 1980 than it is now. It was really very European. And we were not very European. So, you know, we went over there. We had some difficult performances. Went and saw a sex show in Stockholm that scared the hell out of all of us. And then we came back home, and so we didn't go again for about 5 more years. But when we did go, the audience really responded. I mean, it's an incredible audience overseas. Considering that most of it is second language at best, the level of response and the level of passion for music is amazing over there, and they're very interested in America and what it's about, and it's a deep audience too. It's an audience they're interested in exactly what you're singing about and what you're saying. It's been one of the great pleasures of our life going over and playing over there. So, but it's incredible. I'd say probably 2/3 of our audience is there now. You know.
It's if you ever have an opportunity to schedule a vacation while you can catch a Bruce concert, I highly encourage it. It's amazing to see the number of people doing that. I've just never seen anything like it around the world.
I gotta say that the audiences we just had at MetLife and in Philadelphia and Boston. Yeah, they were incredible. We had incredible audience here just a couple of weeks ago that were right up there with the best in the world. You know,
that's great. You know, a question I think a lot of people have wondered over the years is, and I've wondered, have you ever thought about starring in a movie?
It's too late now, man. Could be somebody's dad or grandpa, maybe. You know. I'm waiting for that part to come along. Outside of that, I don't think so.
I think you would be great at it. I think a lot of fans would love to see you. So I highly encourage it. You mentioned cheeseburgers. So one of the things in the book is you're a cheeseburger connoisseur. So what are your favorite places around the world that you love cheeseburgers?
That's a tough one. I don't know. I'm less than I used to be. You know, I was for a long time. I was a junk food addict, but I've since learned to eat other things. But best cheeseburger, I couldn't tell you. There's some good places along the Jersey Shore. Max's Hot Dogs, Windmill. They do it well, Jersey Shore style.
So when you think about rock and roll today, where do you think it is, and who do you think are the great sort of singers or rockers that you're seeing coming up today that are?
Gosh, I'm trying to think of what I like. Green Day, they make great records, and they really, you know, they're always thoughtful and intense, and they have a band that plays great together. You know, they play great together. My old friends from U2 are still doing just fine. You know, they consistently sound great and are creative. I have an iPod full of things that can't come to mind at the moment, but there's a lot of good music out there. A lot of very good music of all kinds. You know.
Are there other genres that you're listening to and that you think are great that you've been exposed to recently, or new artists?
I like Kendrick Lamar a lot. He's intense, and he's a great rapper, very intense. I like Kanye West. I think Kanye West makes great records. You know, I love his records. You know, those are just very creative, amazing records. Let me think who else. That's it for now.
Those are great. So, a lot of friends and women in the audience asked me to ask you this. So it's, you know, you look incredible. Your stamina. You're you know, talking about the Meadowlands and what he's done in the last couple of weeks. The longest concerts ever. You know, over 4 hours. What's the secret? Obviously, I could use a little bit of it, and so.
There's not much of a secret to it, you know. I don't intend to play for 4 hours, and if it was up to me, I would prefer not to, you know. But we kind of come out and we know we're going to go 3. That's how it starts, you know. So I'm going to go 3:15 for a little while. Then you go in 3:20 or 3:30, and then suddenly the night just evolves into. It organically grows into the length that it's a bit self-determining. You know, it determines itself. I wait until I feel like we've delivered the whole picture to you. You know, we're coming out there to do something epic. You know, it's supposed to be long. It should be hard to a certain point, and it's what we like to deliver to the audience. You know, we want you to go home having had a big experience, having had something that, you know, you're going to point back to and say, yeah, but man, you know, the time they played it here or there, or, you know, we're trying to make a memory for you. And just there's just nights where that's where it goes, you know. But we've always played a long time. You know, ever since we were very young, because we started playing in clubs where you played 5 sets a night. That's 5 hours. You played 5 15-minute sets a night. So that was very, very common. It was when what was hard was when we go out on tour with people where we played 30 minutes. You know, you played 4 songs and you were done. You were off stage. That was actually a bit difficult because you didn't feel like you could deliver your best. But the shows are just, I'm trying to find that place where it takes off. If it takes off for me, I know it does for you. And I search for that place every night. It comes at different moments in the show. You know, that's really just the way that the show developed. It's not something that, I'm not trying to break my record every night. I prefer not to, like I say. You know, the band doesn't complain too much, you know, so.
You know, there's some beautiful moments in the book about Clarence that I really loved, and you talked. You talked about, you know, the first time you realized what he felt like at times playing in different types of crowds.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, we played in the Ivory Coast. We played this huge stadium with all black faces. And we came out and said, gee, is this going to work? We got 5 or 6 white New Jersey guys, 1 black guy. We're kind of playing these 4 on the floor leaden rhythms. You know, it's a crowd used to Afrobeat and all that beautiful swinging music. So we came out, counted into Born in the USA, not wanting to take any chances, you know. Let's see what happens when we detonate the nuclear bomb. This was 1988, so. And everybody just kind of stood there with their mouths open for about 60 seconds. I thought it was over, and then it just exploded, and everybody climbed on board. It was one of the great little shows of our lives, but it gave me a sense of what C's felt. You know, C was at one point the E Street Band was 3 black guys and 3 white guys, and it gave us a tremendous mix of influences. And it was when the band was a little more of a jazz soul band, actually, you know, a little more of a rock and soul band, and so Davey and Boom, who are our keyboardist and piano player, left, and it had an effect on Clarence, and it came up from time to time, you know, but it was just part of being in the band.
Another great story that I think was probably the most poignant part of the book for me, and very touching in that standpoint. I think a great message to people. You talk about how you met your dad later in life after he'd moved out to California, and you had a conversation with him where you sort of reconciled a little bit some of the issues and what he said to you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's a funny moment. He just came and visited me before I was on the cusp of being a father myself. So he drove down from San Francisco, and he surprised me in the morning, and he came in, and my father was somebody who could come in, and we could sit down, and that was that. There would be no conversation, And so I tried making small talk as best as I could, and he said, well, he didn't want me to make the same mistakes that he made, I think. And he actually came down to, in his own way, tell me so. And by saying, yeah, it was a little rough. It was a little rough on you when you were young. And it was a simple conversation. I recount it much better in the book, but it was a little recognition of just the truth of our lives together, and it was kind of all I needed, and I always kept it in the back of my mind to rethink when my own kids came along, I feel a little funny talking about it here, because it's better read, I think, but anyway.
I agree. I just the thing that it reminded me of is I think everyone that reads it, and how important it is to tell the people you love them, and talk about it, which I think was great. That's kind of the message, and that's a great message to give.
Yeah, I was lucky. Most people, they have a troubled childhood with your parents or with your father or mother, and it never gets right again. It doesn't get healed. It doesn't get addressed. And I was lucky in that, as my father grew older and as we grew older together, that those things we found a way to sort of put them in context, and had a good relationship at the end of his life.
So you spent 7 years writing the book.
Probably 2 years, really. I spent 7 years with the book around. And I'd write a little bit, and I'd put it away for a year, and we'd go on the road. And sometimes I'd put it away for longer than that. So I think the entire time it probably took, if I put it end to end, might be a couple of years. But I took all that time because I'd go back and reread it and see if it was worth continuing, So, but it took a while. It took a little while.
You didn't have a diary or things in the past of this. You had to remember and.
Oh, yeah, that's why I wrote it now before I forgot every fucking thing. I'm at that age where it's like you're forgetting things already. So,
well, it's not surprising, given you're a prolific writer of songs, that you could do it with a book. But I can tell you, just personally, it's great to see the real Bruce story from Bruce, as opposed to having it written by somebody else. Or I think that's a great thing.
Nice. Thank you. Well, the book. The book was different. It was different to write. You write in prose. It's very different than songwriting. You got to find the music that's in the words themselves. You got to find rhythm. You got to create rhythm. You got to create momentum. The book has to move itself along a certain way. There's certain things that are in common with songwriting, but it's a bit of another job also. So part of in the early parts, I was just trying to write to see if I could. Could I write something that would hold people's interest over a period of so many pages? So.
I love the way you did it in the short story versions of it. I think it allowed you to present it almost like a song.
Yeah, that was just what happened. I didn't have a plan when I started. I didn't have a plan. I wrote a little bit, then I had a little subchapter. Then I wrote a little bit more, and I had a little subchapter. So that was just the way that it asked to be written, really.
So like you, I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
And you talk a lot about that in the book. And spiritually, how do you think, those things have impacted your music and your life?
Well, I had the sort of the worst of the Catholic school experience. You know, it was the 50s. There were all the nuns and the priests. We lived virtually at the church. There was our house. There was a little grassy field. Then there was the church, the convent, priest's rectory, the Catholic grammar school, and it was all on top of us, and we were on top of it. So we lived just in the bosom of the Catholic Church my whole childhood. And it gave them incredible influence over our thoughts and our feelings. And, you know, a lot of it was instilled by fear in those days, which was very effective. And so I made it for 8 years, and after that I couldn't take any more. By the 6th grade, I was already really rejecting it and getting in a certain amount of trouble. But it sort of ruined the religion for me in that I could never go back with an open mind and really embrace it again. But it entered into my writing very deeply, and it stayed there since I started. You know, my songs are filled with Catholic imagery, filled with Christian imagery. They deal with a lot of morality and different questions about living. So it was very, very connected to the Catholic Church, and my music has gained a lot of its power from that imagery. You know, so and I still use it quite regularly. You know, it was a very good language to write in. Not quite as good to live in, but it was a good language to write in.
I wasn't a very good altar boy. I thought I was until I heard your
My
story.
terrible stories.
And then I realized I wasn't that bad.
Yeah. I was a disaster. You know, I was talking about this the other night on Colbert. It was just. I was just terrible at it. You know, you had to have a tremendous discipline. You had to learn all of the Latin. There was a lot of Latin to learn. And you had to learn all of it. And you had to have it, you know, be able to completely recollect it. Then you had to remember all of the stations of the Mass and where you were supposed to be. And I wasn't that into it to learn all those things. You know, I was into it to get out of school a little bit and satisfy my mother. And so I lasted for one Mass, and that was it. I never did it again.
One last question, and we'll wrap this up. I hear you have a new album possibly coming out. Anything?
Nah, I don't want to talk too much about it. It's it's been done for a while, you know, and it's pretty good. I hope it's good. It's kind of a solo record, and maybe we'll get it out this year sometime if we're lucky. Yay! Get the band
On Apple Music.
Why not?
Look, this has been a dream come true for me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Personally, you have for the last 40 years been a big part of my life, and one of the great things that you've done is you keep creating, you keep doing things every year, and so you continue to be a big part of my life. I've made my kids. I took them to Bruce concerts since they were, 6, 7 years old, so they're
great.
Bruce fans.
That's great.
And this has just been a thrill for me.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
And,
Thanks for coming out. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Hey, thanks a lot, man. Thank you.
Just